HR leaders just like you are moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience. And that's why I put together a specific community just for that purpose. It's called Future of Work Leaders. It's bringing together 100 of the world's top chief human resource officers who are moving beyond traditional HR to focus on the future of work and employee experience. We have CHROs from companies like Dow, Lego, Neiman Marcus, Northrop Grumman, Johnson & Johnson, and dozens of others. So if you are a CHRO and you're interested in connecting with peers who are also focused on the future of work and employee experience, if you don't want to spend a ton of money, if you don't want to be subjected to upselling and cross-selling and speeches and just all the fluff that some of these other communities out there are offering, then check out futureofworkleaders.com. I promise you, you will be glad that you did. Hey everyone, welcome to another episode of Future Ready Leadership. My guest today is Dan Priest, the Chief AI Officer at PwC US. Dan, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you for having me, Jacob.
All right, well, the first question on everyone's mind is going to be, what does a Chief AI Officer do? So what do you do?
I spend half my time working on artificial intelligence and the other half of my time doing therapy with people doing artificial intelligence.
Walk them off the edge?
Yes. Yeah. Well, just get them in the right headspace to manage through this big change. But my responsibilities are really about making sure we have a technology foundation on which to build, making sure that we have a strategy that guides all of our investments, and making sure that our clients are well served with the latest perspectives in AI. And during the course of all of that, you see very human interactions with AI and very strong human reactions to AI that have to be managed.
Mm-hmm.
That's my point. I did not, when I took the job in July, expect to spend so much time on the human dimension of AI, but I do.
Yeah, that's also an interesting thing that I want to make sure that we talk about is kind of the human side there. I'm curious about the role, though. I know it's a fairly new role. I think it's been a little less than a year since you've been in the role of Chief AI Officer. I'm curious about the role itself. Are you finding that more and more organizations around the world are having Chief AI Officers? And what is the structure there? Do you report into the CEO? Do you have your own AI team? Is it a whole separate function? Walk me through a little bit what that looks like and how you see that sort of evolving over the next, 1 to 3 years.
Yeah, it's a C-suite role. I line up to the chief commercial officer for PwC. I regularly interact with our CEO on the topic. It is a really big priority for us as a professional services firm because we see so much potential disruption, good disruption, but disruption nonetheless from AI. And I've spent a lot of time, working with other organizations who are contemplating the role, who, even if it's not a named role, the responsibilities of the role might be subsumed by the chief digital officer or a chief operating officer. And my rough estimate is that still a minority of the companies out there, the Fortune 100 or Fortune 500 companies have the role. The responsibilities associated with the role are probably what's more important.
Okay, so a lot of companies don't have the role yet; they just have the responsibilities, or they actually do have a Chief AI Officer.
I think the majority of businesses we've worked with still do not have a formal CAIO role, but they're contemplating it and the responsibilities associated with it. So, for instance, I was saying, we have a strategy, we have a foundation. A big part of the foundation that we built relates to responsible AI. Like, how do you use data responsibly? How do you build responsibly? How do you build trust in AI? That's an incredibly important responsibility. Whether you have a CAIO role or not, you should have a responsible AI program, for
Yeah.
instance.
Okay. That totally makes sense. And then I'm really also curious, just kind of the role of the chief AI officer. Like before that role existed, would this fall under the purview of like the CTO, the CIO? Like who traditionally was responsible for a lot of this AI stuff? Because traditionally, a lot of people think of it as purely tech, but as you mentioned, a lot of your job is not actually even involved in tech. It's kind of understanding the human side of it. So
That's
who
right.
who owned this before? Was this just kind of floating around and everybody kind of had a piece of the AI world?
Yeah, a lot of companies treated it as a technology initiative or a category of technology that would appropriately be managed by the CTO or the CDO, the chief data officer, or the chief digital officer, or the chief information officer, or the chief innovation officer. Those were common homes for AI when it was considered an emerging technology in particular.
Yeah.
I will say that over the last couple of years, it's gone from behaving like an emerging technology to behaving like a general purpose technology now.
Yeah.
And when that shift happened from tech at the top, right? Tech at the top of the AI agenda, driving the AI agenda, as it has evolved into a general purpose technology, that triangle is reverted back, right? So if it started with tech at the top, and then it would kind of make its way in a minor way towards the business. It's now reverted back where business leadership, business strategy, driving the AI agenda. And there's some very good reasons for that. Some big lessons learned for that. But
Hmm.
because of that, you see more and more new homes for AI emerging, like in our case, the chief commercial officer.
Oh,
Uh,
interesting.
yeah, and so it's while it's still not uncommon to have it live within the job jar of a CTO, for instance, increasingly it's being picked up by business executives outside of the technology domain.
Yeah. Oh, interesting. Um, let's talk a little bit about the state of AI because people who are following the news probably are familiar with ChatGPT. There's a new version of that that's coming out. ChatGPT 5 is supposed to be rumored to be around the corner. We're talking about DeepSeek. We're talking about all this stuff out there, and I think a lot of people are just wondering how advanced are we with AI really? Like, what are these capabilities truly? Is it hype? Because we've been talking about AI for years and it's never kind of gotten to the point where a lot of people thought. And so, at least I find a lot of business leaders are thinking, is it really different this time? Is it just kind of the same? So, when you're talking to a lot of leaders at organizations who are asking you these questions about AI, what are you telling them as far as where we are and the progress we've made and where we're going?
So certainly it's hyped. Certainly there is hype about AI, but there's a reality to it too that is foundational and industrial strength and ready for prime time. And there's a lot of proof points out there now that confirm that. But we talk about a jagged frontier, meaning AI is not monolithic and it's better suited for certain use cases than others. Like it's not a perfectly uniform innovation frontier. It's jagged, and you have to kind of know what use cases lend themselves nicely to AI, and then you have to invest in developing the AI capabilities for others. And it
Hmm.
does take an investment. It takes some of your best talent. It takes perseverance, engineering know-how, business know-how. These are big industrialized problems that we're solving, and it takes the best of us to come up with the right solutions. The technology's good. I am telling you, like, you're right. It feels like an overnight sensation
Yep.
that was 70 years in the making. The technology's good though. It is, and I would say it from a leadership perspective. Um, we each need our aha moment to give us conviction that the technology is good and it is ready, and you can build reliable capabilities on it and with it. And so, I have my aha moments both personally and professionally with AI that give me conviction that we're making a big investment that will pay off. And the technology is also getting better. What it is today, it is good, and what it will be tomorrow is even better. And the acceleration of this wave of AI is stunning. It's going so very fast, and that has people in business and leadership implications too.
Yeah. So where are we, do you think, kind of in the state of AI as far as capabilities? Because you were mentioning that there are some real proof points as well. Are there any like cool examples or case studies or stories that come to mind of how organizations are using AI that's really making an impact? Because a lot of people think of something like ChatGPT. It'll write something for you. It'll answer questions for you. It'll make some images for you. But the implications, I think, especially in the business world, go far, far deeper. So what are you seeing as far as how companies are really using AI to make a difference? Do any cool things come to mind?
Sure. So we just did a CEO survey, and the results suggest those proof points are real. So over half of the CEOs surveyed said they were getting efficiencies across their business. About a third said that they were growing revenue with AI. We had done a previous survey where same kind of numbers, but just leaders talking about how embedded AI had become in the back office, in their workflows, in their front office, in products and services. And at that point, they were saying a third of products and services had AI embedded, which I was kind of surprised by. That it was that high even. And so we did a fair number of client conversations, and had one with a leader of a cruise line, and he was saying how AI's to our previous conversation, AI has been around for a long time in the form of deep learning, machine learning, and they'd been using AI to predict what a cruiser would want. And now Gen AI, they were moving to Gen AI to move past predictions into personalization. So you think about a cruise line, it's kind of a microcosm of the economy, right? It's got restaurants, it's got shops, it's got hospitality, it's got excursions, it's got all sorts of things that you can personalize. So it's one thing to predict that somebody likes to shop. It's another thing to give them a personalization engine to say, I like to shop for luxury brands, and I like this luxury brand in particular. And then you can curate those products in advance of the cruise to meet those personalized expectations. And so there's some really great use cases in the front office, and then in the back office, the ability to use code generators at scale to take millions of hours out of the systems development lifecycle. This is very expensive knowledge work. That's another pretty powerful proof point that skilled work, complex tasks at scale across a lot of different different types of activities, functional specs, technical specs, code configuration, testing, moving it into production, that AI could have such a material impact to see 30, 40% of the effort go away and be replaced by more intelligence. So when I hear things like that, and I see like at PwC, we've invested in some of those capabilities. We've worked with our clients to achieve similar capability. We've seen it actually show up in very real business capabilities. That's what gives me conviction that this is real.
It's funny. We were driving yesterday with some friends, and I did an AI podcast where I trained an AI agent on my voice, and I uploaded, I think, like 3 to 4 hours of audio in there. And I let them listen to this podcast, and then I was like, that's not actually me speaking. And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, I didn't record a single word there, and I didn't even create the script. I said I went into ChatGPT. It was a story about IBM. And so I went into ChatGPT. It created the script for me, including like different places where to put in sound effects and giving me links to where to find the sound effects. And then I put it into an AI voice clone tool. And, I uploaded hours of me speaking, and it literally created a podcast in my voice with all my intonations and mannerisms and how I speak. And we're driving in the car, and they're like, this is very, very weird. So
how did it compare?
You couldn't tell the difference.
Wow.
Yeah, you couldn't tell the difference. It is pretty surreal. And I think, a lot of people are always wondering, is it different this time? And, I'm an optimist. I don't know where you kind of sit on that spectrum, but I'm definitely an optimist. I know recently JD Vance, our VP, was speaking at a big AI conference. I think it was in France.
Yeah.
And he made big mention that, at least in the States, they're going to view AI not as a tool that's going to replace human beings, but as a way to kind of like augment humans and jobs and unleash creativity and innovation and to have protections for workers and all that sort of stuff. So that was very reassuring, at least to hear that the way that our administration currently thinks about it is through that lens, which I think is great. But there's also a lot of doom and gloom people out there who say it's going to replace 1 billion jobs, and we need universal basic income, and that we're only going to be working like 1 to 2 hours a day, and it's the end of the world, and Skynet is going to take over. So where are you on the fear end of the world with AI spectrum versus the unlocking opportunities and possibilities with AI spectrum?
I'm an optimist too, unequivocally. I think there are. It's interesting. I did see some of that speech that you're referencing, and it's interesting though that the thinking has evolved a bit over the last year, where the emphasis on safety and concerns about the implications of AI have given way to more about the potential that comes from AI. And I think more and more people feel like before we get to the worst case scenario, there's a lot of really good things that we can achieve with AI. And we need to make sure that we're planful about the consequences of AI and the the potential pitfalls associated with AI and the human implications of AI. But there's just such an incredible value unlock available to us right now through this generation of AI that the majority of our clients are focused on: how do I harvest those benefits?
Yeah.
How do I do it responsibly? How do I do it in a trustworthy way? But I do think in that same CEO survey, by the way, still about a third of the CEOs talked about still needing to earn trust to fully. Yeah. And so, there's still a ways to go, but I think most people that I'm talking to these days are focused on how to get the upside, how to get the performance boost, how to get the productivity gains, how to get the creativity gains, how to use AI as a thought partner, and maybe a little less of the worst case scenario conversation,
Which is good. Which is good.
which is,
Yeah,
yes,
I feel like the previous administration was much more, what's the right way to say it, more guarded of AI. And the current administration is like, let it go, remove regulation, remove obstacles, just open it up. And I think maybe DeepSeek, China's AI tool, was a little bit of a push in that direction when we started to see it. But it'll be very interesting to see what happens over the next, 1, 2, 3 years. Some people are predicting sentient intelligence by 2027, 2028, which is,
mind blowing.
I
Yeah.
mean, the idea that you would have sentient intelligence that you can potentially access would be, I don't know, the equivalent of like discovering aliens. So that would be nuts,
Yeah. Yeah.
to say the least. So we'll see what happens with that. Um,
But I'd say on the two things on that. One, I like um, I like the fact that we're pushing the innovation agenda around AI before we regulate it too heavily.
hmm.
Certainly, there needs to be some safeguards in place, but the um, deep seek LLM that stormed onto the scene recently was just such a terrific reminder of how important innovation is, and the way they built that LLM is it was innovative, and we need to keep innovating with it. We're very early days yet, and we need to keep innovating. Regulation has a cooling effect um, on innovation. So I like that approach to AI. And then when you start talking about um, sentience and AGI, what I always remind people of is that AI is democratizing intelligence. AI is going to be the great IQ equalizer, right? So there'll be more intelligence out there than there's ever been. It'll be more accessible to people. And as AI democratizes and as AI becomes increasingly ubiquitous and intrinsic to the way we work and play and live our lives, that's not the number one differentiator anymore. Right? Like, so if everybody has it, it's kind of like who makes the best use of it, who combines AI with creative thinking or deep
Yeah.
specialization, right? It's that going back to the boost, right? But when you look around, the world today, it's not necessarily just the most intelligent person who succeeds. It's the person who's the best leader, the best collaborator, the most empathetic, the most creative, the most insightful. There's all these other qualities that, frankly, make us better humans that I think will get emphasized if AI really does become ubiquitous.
Yeah, it reminds me there used to be a tournament. They don't do it anymore, but it was a chess tournament where humans would work with AI. So it's a human with an AI agent, if you want to call it, against another human and an AI agent, and it would be grandmasters who, very skilled chess players would have access to, an engine like Stockfish, and they would play against another grandmaster that had access to a chess engine. And it would be just really interesting to see how the combination of human plus AI would do. And it worked very well years ago when they did it because we weren't at the level of AI now where you could still kind of like trick the AI a little bit. It would get confused with certain positions. It like wouldn't understand certain concepts. Now they don't do it anymore because AI is kind of perfect at the game of chess.
Yeah.
And so there's no need to have the human there anymore.
I think Kasparov was the one who organized those tournaments, right? Who got
Yeah.
beat
Yeah.
by
Yeah. Yeah. Yep.
AI first.
Yeah. Those are
I
pretty,
remember those.
pretty wild.
Yeah.
So you mentioned leadership and strategy a little bit there, but actually before we get into that, getting back to any of these stories or case studies that come up, Just to give people perspective on how capable AI is today, are there any stories or examples that come to mind that help illustrate how powerful AI is? Like, what can it actually do today that maybe it wasn't able to do before?
I mean, this generation of AI is more cognitively powerful. It's more context aware. It's got a much better natural language interface. And so that combination allows us to, it makes possible the personalization example I gave a few minutes ago, right? Like if I'm able to understand the human language in a very natural way. So as an example, years ago, I was doing a project. It was a sourcing strategy, and our big problem was, it was a huge organization. Our big problem was the technology didn't understand that clerical services, secretarial services, and administrative services were all the same thing. And so like when they were spending in a fractured way across the same services, but described with different language. Now, AI knows that. And it knows even colloquial terms, like if I say car or vehicle or my ride, it knows I'm talking about the same thing. And so because it's so powerful in understanding how humans think and speak, it becomes a thought partner. And you are able to interact with it as a thought partner and get very rich insights into subject matter that would have taken so much longer to research before this generation of AI. That now it's at your fingertips. Like if you want, I study labor productivity because of the implications AI has on how that will change. And I love like interacting with these research tools, because in the past, if I did a search, it would go to the labor the Bureau of Labor Statistics, and it'd give me stats. Now it gives me stats, trends, discontinuities, root cause analyses. It is so powerful, and so my thinking is better because of it. It's more cognitively powerful. It's more context aware. And it's very easy to interface with. So there's all sorts of things around, writing, being creative.
I've seen lots of those.
Yeah, solving, big complicated math problems. My daughter had built a website in high school, and she got stuck on a certain feature. She had wanted this national database to download, and then her rating engine to hit this national. She couldn't do it. She wasn't a coder, but she took a coding class in college, got stuck, asked some of the best coders, still stuck. Then she downloaded one of the big foundation models, and in 30 minutes, she was able to do what she couldn't do for 2 years. And she got the feature to work. And so there's so many great ways to use AI to make us better performers, better thinkers, that didn't exist before.
CHROs just like you have been telling me that they want a community of their peers, but specifically focused on the future of work and employee experience. I've been hearing this for around 10 years, and now I'm finally putting something together. It's called Future of Work Leaders. It's a collection of 100 of the world's top CHROs moving beyond traditional HR, specifically focused on the future of work and employee experience. I took everyone's feedback. I heard what CHROs just like you wanted. They don't want to spend a ton of money. They don't want speeches. They don't want upselling or cross-selling. They don't want any fluff. They just want to connect with their peers to focus on strategy, on insights, and on solving real-world problems, and on helping their organization become future-ready. So if that sounds like something you are interested in, check out futureofworkleaders.com. You'll be joining CHROs from brands like Dow, Lego, Neiman Marcus, Johnson & Johnson, and dozens of others. Again, it's futureofworkleaders.com. I can promise you, You will be glad that you checked it out, and I hope to see you in there. And I feel like a lot of the implications, at least the early implications that we're seeing, are very much in like learning, training, development, predictive analytics, HR, a lot of those types of areas. I mean, I run a CHRO group called Future of Work Leaders, and we have, I don't know, almost 40 CHROs in there. And this topic comes up all of the time around AI.
Oh, I got it.
But I find at least that a lot of leaders are cautiously skeptical when it comes to AI. In other words, they're like playing around with it and testing it, but they haven't really gone all in. Put all their data in there, completely rely on it for decision making, completely rely on it for making predictions. It's not like the movie Minority Report. It's not at that level. It's still very much like, hey, help me create a job description. You know what I mean? Like it's very touching the surface. Instead of really, it's like having a Ferrari and you're driving it at 60 miles an hour and you're scared to just kind of like, get on the highway and go 180 with it.
Yeah. That caution is appropriate too.
Yeah.
I was doing some research for a CEO meeting I was going to have, and I asked the foundation model I downloaded a 10K and I asked it to review for like growth trends and then it summarized it for me. And it said, this is, there were $50 billion in 2021 growing at 5%, and $50 billion in 2022 growing at 5%, and $50 billion in 2023 growing at 5%. That couldn't be true, right? And so then I kind of looked into why it was making that mistake, and it was because of the quality of the data it was building off of. It was confusing for me too. But you have to still keep your head in the game. It's still important to quality check things. That was a simple fix, by the way. We pointed it to a different data source and it resolved. But you still, I would not just present that to a CEO and have complete confidence that whatever came from that research was accurate. I sample things and I test that the quality of the analysis is good. And even in writing, I think of it more as a great second draft, right? I get the ideas down. I look for ideas, like sort of editorial comments from the AI, and then I finalize it. That final draft is mine. So I still think there's a lot of value in the human at the center of this AI, thought partner equation.
Yeah, it's interesting that you mentioned that because it's sort of like only as good or as accurate as the data that you give it. And there were all sorts of like issues. I remember when Google's Gemini project was released, and it was changing and mixing up historical references and putting different people in different contexts and situations. And people said, oh, it's got this left wing bias because it made George Washington black, and it did, you know what I mean? Like, so it's like the data that you put into it greatly impacts how the AI tool works. And so, right. For example, if you're relying on a chatbot or on ChatGPT to predict something, if the data isn't good, it's going to make predictions that aren't good. So I don't know. It's kind of, I always wonder, like, are we going to be able to get to a point where data is really that good? Is it that clean? Is it that accurate? Is it that relevant? Is it that objective? Because if not, then will AI really even be that useful? Because I hear some stories from CHROs, they say, we use these AI models to predict people in certain roles, and we had great success. And then another CHRO will say, oh yeah, we tried to do that. It was terrible. It was like the worst prediction ever. So I don't know. Are we ever going to get to a place where it's really as useful as it can be if the data is not there?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, the data, I would not wait for great quality data. You'll be waiting a very long time.
Yeah, that's the thing.
Yeah, it's the difference between deterministic use cases and probabilistic use cases. Deterministic use cases are, if I'm doing financial reporting to the SEC, I need that thing precise,
Yeah.
right? I need it very reliable, very accurate. Probabilistic is, this person will probably be good in this role.
Hmm.
And, they'll have a logic for why they probably are a fit for that particular role. And ultimately, humans, we maintain the thinking, the strategy, the cultural sensitivities that will ultimately be the reasons why we pick certain candidates over the other, right? So, in other words, again, AI in a probabilistic scenario will have an input. It'll have its logic, but the human still makes the decision for
Yeah.
other factors beyond just the AI input.
Hmm. So I guess that's where, I mean, do you need to train people in a certain way to not make decisions purely based on what AI says? It seems to me like it's a different skill set, right? A different mindset to have. Because if I don't know, if I'm a manager at a company and I'm assuming that whatever AI tool I'm using is making predictions for me, I need to have the skill set to say, wait a minute, like I can't just put somebody in a role because of that, because my observations don't align with that. So it seems like a challenging problem
Yes,
to solve, because you have your human intuition and observation versus what AI is telling you, and you're kind of like, wait a minute, something doesn't make sense here.
that's right. And so the answer to the question is yes. We all need to be trained on how to prompt AI for the right things. You can create biases just by the way you ask the question.
Hmm.
And so prompting the right way, not constraining it unnaturally, um, important. And then when the results come back after the prompting, so when AI, when that agent does its thing and brings back the results to you, you are still accountable for the decisions, and you need to. That's why I test, right? That's why I don't just say, okay, here are the results embedded in the
Yeah.
document, send it off to the CEO. I go through and do a quality check. Just by the way, just like I would do with um, any team member, right? Like we have an apprenticeship model at PwC. Like we develop our people over time, and a big part of that apprenticeship model is an interaction, and the reinforcement learning, and the feedback loop that, hey, this wasn't quite right, you could do it differently, and that's true too with
Yeah.
AI. Like being trained on how to interact with AI is a very important investment companies should be making.
Yeah, I've even gotten in arguments with AI before. Like it'll, like ChatGPT will tell me it can't do something, and I'm like, "What do you mean? Yes, you can." And they'll say, "Oh, you're
Yeah.
right. I can do that." Like,
Yes.
yeah, like sometimes it'll say, "I'm sorry, I can't make this image for you," and I'm like, "Yes, you can. I'm paying the premium. You can make an image for me." And then it'll say, "Oh,
Yeah.
you're right. I can." And like, what is happening here? Like, what
It
planet am I
is
on?
so human, isn't it? Though, like that is weird. And then I've also seen people manipulate the AI to give them things that maybe weren't in the scope of services. But AI has certain human characteristics, and that push and pull that you're describing. That, at least for now, in this stitch in time, that is a reality.
Yeah, I mean, it's really bizarre. Even sometimes I'll ask it for like data and comparisons, and I have to like check it. Because I'll say, give me like historical data from, I don't know, like 1960 to 2025 around something. And it'll give me data and it'll give me a chart. And then I'll have to
Hmm.
ask it, is this real data? And it'll say, well, some of it is, but there wasn't any data from 2022 to 2025. So I kind of assumed based on that trajectory what it would look like. Now to have to say, no, don't make things up. Like, give me real data. And so but if you don't know to ask it that, you're just going to take screenshots of that and say, oh, look at this cool trend data and stuff like that I found. But it does stuff. And
Yes.
it doesn't tell you that it's doing it. Like, it doesn't say, hey, I just made up 5 years of data for you in a trend line. Like, I know you're going to be presenting to executives or putting this up on social media for everyone, but so I don't know, like, how do you, because you also can't challenge it and push back every time it gives you information. Like, if it makes a
Yeah.
prediction, you can't say, are you sure? Like,
Well,
you
so
know what I mean?
again, yeah, one is the way you prompt would be only use the data in this data set. Do not make assumptions to fill data gaps, right? We did this. We did an analysis of uh, AI innovation over the last 70 years. Innovations being, things, not investments, but things that were demoed and adopted over the last 70 years. The prompt for it was like a page and a half.
Wow.
And but it was great. We did it, in an afternoon in New York. And we curated the data with AI. We did the analytics with AI. We did the visualization with AI. And we kept having to go back and we put certain things in bold letters, right? Like, don't do this, or, do that. And it was like dealing with a team member, like a very
Mm.
high IQ team member. And the more instructions we gave them, the better it did. And that for me was educational about some of the best prompts are really long, really detailed, really good context setting, really good instructions, and bolding things that are important to you, repeating things. Like it was that. But that's what's cool about this technology too, is it thinks like humans think. Before, humans had to think like computers thought. Now this AI is thinking like we think, and therefore we're having to retrain ourselves on how to interact with the technology.
Yeah, I've even seen some jobs being posted of prompt creators.
Yeah.
Right. And these are jobs that some companies are paying like hundreds of thousands of dollars to know how to create the right prompt to put into some sort of AI software to give you the best and most accurate response, which is wild to me. Hundreds of
It
thousands of
is.
dollars to know how to do that. So it's crazy to see where this is all going to go.
Yeah, we have prompt engineers now. We have prompt parties. We have prompting parties as
Jeez.
a way to train our people. I got a kick out of that when I heard about it. But yeah, we have prompt parties where people come together and they share best practices in prompting,
Hmm.
because it is a skill that's trainable and transferable.
Yeah, it's like a whole new field, right?
Yeah,
Prompt generator for AI. It's really surreal.
it is.
So I know we only have a couple minutes left. I thought maybe we could touch on some of the implications that this might have, and we can look at it from a couple of different perspectives. Like, one is an employee, right? So let's say I don't know, I'm just relatively new. I'm entering the workforce. What advice would you have for employees in that position? They're maybe in their 20s, again, relatively new in the workforce, and they're starting to see the influx of AI.
Mhm.
It's interesting because I think there are some who use it for everything and anything, and they'll just like copy and paste it. They'll use it for emails. They use it literally for everything, to the point where like it's too much. You have other people who are scared to use it. So I don't know, what do you do? Right? I'm a marketing manager. I'm working at PwC. I just started working there, and I have access to ChatGPT for whatever I want. What am I supposed to be doing and thinking?
So two things. One, that if you believe what I said before, that AI is a source of innovation and performance boost, if you want to be a high performing member of a team, you should figure out how to incorporate AI into your way of working.
Mm.
I talk a lot about making AI an intrinsic part of business. So make it a very natural part of everything we make, everything we do. And those team members who are comfortable and fluent in AI have a competitive advantage. And so why would you give that away, right? Like, so first, it is a tool, and like any other tool, you've got to learn how to use it. And those who work with the tools of their craft are probably going to perform better. And so have that tool in your toolbox and make good use of it. Now, on the other end of the spectrum, I would also say there's this concern that it's sort of like me in directions. I used to have a terrific sense of direction. I don't know how I navigated cities so well without all these mapping capabilities. My sense of direction, it feels like it's atrophied a little bit, right? Because I don't you I no matter where I go, I'm putting in the address and getting help. And so especially in an early career stage context, you should be developing critical skills that you own and that you exercise and that you feel confident, like critical thinking. Don't and I do see sort of the more junior members of the team sometimes too readily turning over the critical thinking to the AI. And that's why I say sample it, test it, challenge it as appropriate. But there are certain critical skills that you're going to need to be successful with long term. Make sure those are developing and not atrophying.
Yeah, balancing critical thinking with just assuming like it's sort of like I have 2 kids, and they always say, don't solve all your problems for your kids. Teach them how to solve their own problems. And it sort of reminds me of this too, where don't just assume that if you can't figure something out, you're going to go to ChatGPT. Try to use your own reasoning, your own brain, your own critical thinking to, figure something out. And then maybe use ChatGPT to help you along the way, but not just to be the crutch that you go to for everything.
That's right. That would be my advice. And it is interesting. I'm later in my career. AI is not going to affect me as much as it is my daughters, right? I've got a daughter in college, and she's going to go into the workforce soon. But that generation is so enthusiastic about AI, and the late career stage folk tend to be a little on guard. The early career stage folk tend to be embracing it, which I kind of respect and love. That even though it's going to be incredibly disruptive to their jobs, they're working with it and they're embracing it, and they're going to do some really interesting things with it, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, I have a 4-year-old and an 8-year-old, and they see and hear how I interact with different AI tools. Like if I say, "Hey Siri," which is probably gonna beep next to me, but they hear how I will talk to Siri, for example, versus Alexa. They are familiar with ChatGPT. They see, if they have a question, they'll ask Alexa the question. So it's just so it's like commonplace for them. Which, when you take a step back and realize, you're like, that is so odd. Because I used to play Nintendo. I didn't have internet when I was a kid. I'd be playing outside. And now they're talking to a piece of software, asking it questions, having it tell it jokes, right? If there's a fact that they want to know, they go to it. And it's like I'm imagining my 4-year-old and my 8-year-old in the workplace after having been interacting with these AI tools for a decade, for 15 years, and what that's going to translate to into how they live and how they work. And it scares me a little bit sometimes. So you gotta like unplug things so they, don't go near it.
There's something, it's like the calculator, right? Like when I was growing up, there was an age where we weren't allowed to use the calculator in class.
I remember those days.
Age when we were, right? But we had developed base skills enough where they would serve us as needed, and to get to the next skill set, to the next level, calculators had a place.
Yep. The scientific calculator, the TI-85.
Exactly.
That somehow they figured out that you could play Snake on the TI-85 back in the days. It was no longer a calculator. It was like a mini Game Boy. Ah, the good
Yeah,
old days. The good
next
old days.
level stuff.
Maybe a last question for you before we wrap up then is around the role of leadership, because to me, at least when when it used to come to anything technology related, we always used to hand it off to IT,
Yeah.
to the CTO or CIO. And now it feels like every leader has to be a tech-driven leader, right? I mean, you don't necessarily need to know how to code AI or how to develop it, but you need to understand what it is, roughly how it works, the implications it might have. So it's kind of like every leader today needs to have that technology component in there. So for anybody listening or watching, they're a mid-level leader or maybe even a senior leader, and they're seeing what's happening with AI. What advice do you have for them? Because clearly running away from it and pretending like it doesn't exist isn't helpful. So what do you do with it? How do you embrace it in the right way?
So a couple of things. One, over the past decade or longer, technology leaders made a big push to understand business. The criticism was always technology was happening in a disconnected way from business,
Yeah.
and technology leaders had a hard time translating technology into a business language that the other executives could understand. And, CTOs, CIOs, CDOs, they've gotten much better at speaking business. And the same thing, it's just interesting. The same thing is happening with business leaders now, where they recognize that they do have to have a working knowledge and vocabulary to talk about technology, because technology is so central to a company's competitiveness these days. And so you see now CEOs and CIOs, or I'm sorry, CEOs, CFOs, COOs, non-tech leadership roles, talking very convincingly and very credibly about technology, data architectures
Yeah.
and application architectures. And they've invested in upskilling. So if I'm a mid-manager individual, if I'm in mid-management, I would mirror those leadership skills, right? I would invest in having the right understanding. You don't have to be expert, but you should understand the basics around architecture, the basics around how AI work. You should have the language that's required to speak about these things, and speak about them even in business terms, strategy terms, financial terms, right? To do the translation back and forth from business to tech is extremely valuable. Again, just because of how central technology has become to a company's competitiveness. And then for leaders in general, I kind of opened with the comment about, dealing with the human element of AI. Humans will find every possible way to undermine the value of AI
Mm,
if they don't feel like they have a place at the end of this AI journey.
yeah.
And so it's up to leaders to be articulate about what the future holds for that individual, like the human member of the team. What is your core value proposition, and ring fence that, and make sure they trust that it's their value proposition. And once you do that, they'll get really creative with everything outside that ring fenced value proposition, because everything else is fair game. They know they've got a place at the end of this journey. They're going to be much more creative and much more open to transforming the rest of what they do. But it's up to a leader to let them know what will change, and let them know what won't change,
Mm.
so that they get the buy-in.
Yeah, and I think that's a good way to think about that. Dan, I can't believe an hour already flew by. Let people know, where can they go to learn more about you? I know you're on LinkedIn, but anything you want to mention for people to check out?
Just go to PwC.com, and we have some really good viewpoints out there on these topics we just talked about. But I really enjoyed the conversation, Jacob.
Yeah, thank you so much for joining me. And thanks everyone for tuning in. My guest, again, Dan Priest, the Chief AI Officer at PwC US. I have to say that really slowly because otherwise it's not so easy to say. But Dan, thanks again. I really appreciate it. Thanks for tuning in to today's episode of Future Ready Leadership. If you want to get access to more content on how you can become future ready, make sure to subscribe to the newsletter. It's thefutureorganization.com/newsletter. And if you enjoyed this episode, please send it to somebody who you would like to see become a better leader. Thanks for listening or watching, and I will see you next time.